Welcome along. Hope you are doing well wherever you are in the world today. So the commander I'm going to be polishing up in today's video is a bit more recent than the legends I normally dust off for the channel. There have been several interesting additions to Blue Steel in the world of MTG lately that have inspired me to rebuild a Zahid Djinn of the Lamp deck. Zahid was printed in Dominaria, and I found his mechanic very interesting, which is a literal rub the magic lamp effect that enables you to get a big blue flying fatty onto the battlefield a lot faster than what we're used to in this color. When I first attempted to build a Zahid deck, I made it a pure Djinn tribal, but since then there have been way more effective Djinns printed both in mono blue and in other colors. So I've gone back to the well, and I have redesigned the deck with artifacts that help reinforce the flavor and enhance Zahid's effectiveness as a mono blue aggro commander. That said, I have retained a few Djinns that fit in with the aggro approach I'm going for with this Zahid deck, but I am focusing a lot on artifacts that are lamp-like and antiques that always remind my opponents that I am trying to rub the bottle in the right way. I'm going to be honest though and say that I do not have an Aladdin's lamp in the deck, because while I am a stickler for theme, I don't want to be too crazy about it. That said, I do have two cards that are really important to sell the theme. The first is Ring of Three Wishes, which is way better than Aladdin's Lamp and explains itself. And the second is what I would term as Zahid's Lieutenant for this deck, which is the Tempest Djinn, which is probably the best Djinn in mono blue. The reason I've introduced Tempest Djinn so early is that as we go through the deck tech, you'll see that I've focused a lot around increasing the presence and threat of Tempest Djinn once he lands on the battlefield. But before we get to the creatures and spells of the deck, I have 35 lands overall. With a monocolored deck, I normally just go with 35 lands because especially in blue, where you've got a lot of card draw to help you get your land drops quite early. But I've got 8 non-basics that are worth talking about. So Lonely Sandbar, Desert of the Mindful, Skyline Cascade, Memorial to Genius, which is a good utility land, Blighted Cataract again for further card draw, Seed of the Synod as an artifact land, Rogue's Passage to make Zahid or Tempest Djinn unblockable, and Temple of the False God just for that extra colorless mana. So let's begin with the creature base. So there aren't a lot of creatures here, but a few are really dependent upon Tempest Djinn. So we've got a Renegade Doppelganger, which can become a creature as it lands. Stratus Dancer, which is a 2-mana Djinn monk. Mirror Image as to copy Tempest Djinn. Pilgrim's Eye for that extra island. Cyani, Eye of the Storm. So this is one of the better mono blue Djinns. If we're talking pure Djinn tribal, Cyani is probably the best option for that, given that this creature enables you to scry X, where X is the number of attacking creatures with flying, but pretty handy in terms of the ability and its presence. Lotus Path Djinn, so it has prowess. Soulblade Djinn, which is prowess times X, so where the previous Djinn only cares about itself, Soulblade Djinn pumps your whole flying team. We've got the old classic in the Mahumori Djinn, and Sage Eye Avengers, so another prowess-based Genie, but this one enables you to bounce a creature an opponent controls, so that's a handy ability to have. Before we get to the artifacts, I want to move into the instant and sorcery spells, because again, this is going to emphasize a lot around Tempest Djinn, but also these spells are selected carefully to emphasize the whole Genie summoning aspect of the deck. So we start with a classic on summon. So this is the classic old school 90s art. Really like that card. So in terms of other bounce, we've got Kiora's Dismissal to bounce enchantments, Rescue, which just brings a permanent back to your hand. I've got Opt, Dive Down to keep the bigger threats on the battlefield. Classic counter spell, Disdainful Stroke, Anticipate. So we start to get to a few digging cards. I've got a keepsake in here. So I like this card because it protects a creature, but it also enables you to draw a card. So a fair few numbers of protection here. Negate, disperse. Like this is classic unsummoning type art, but this enables you to bounce a permanent. Unsubstantiate, a creature or a spell. So again, another send the Djinn back to the bottle. Cackling Counterpart. So here we start to get into the token makers. So Cackling Counterpart is in here to copy Tempest Djinn. Quasi Duplicate is a 2-time copier. We've got a real flavorful Genie looking card here in Dream Cache. So this is just draw 3 cards and put 2 on the bottom, the top of the bottom of your library. Command of Unsummoning. So this is from Portal. Again, this is really, Genie. This is really Genie oriented. Command of Unsummoning. So these portal cards, especially these sorceries, they were printed as sorceries, but they're really odd in that you can only cast them after you're attacked and before you declare interceptors or blockers. So that's how old this card is. We still call blockers interceptors in those days. Return 1 or 2 attacking creatures to their owner's hand. So that's a really Genie looking card there. Also Machinate, however you want to pronounce that. You can look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of artifacts you control. So that enables some top deck manipulating. Stoic Rebuttal, another counter spell that can have its cost reduced. I've got Depths of Desire. So this bounces a creature but enables you to create a treasure. Secrets of the Golden City. So given that you're going to be producing a lot of permanents with this deck, or hopefully with both your permanent spells and your instants and sorceries that create permanents, you will hopefully get to City's Blessing sooner rather than later. I've got a couple of other card draws here related to artifacts. So we've got Thirst for Knowledge, Artificer's Epiphany, so at instant speed. Pirate's Prize, so draw 2 cards, but you create a treasure. So I really want to emphasize I'm really trying to dig for that Tempest Djinn, which is why I've got a lot of card draw in the deck. So, 2 things we want to be digging for gold. We want to be getting some artifacts down to help summon Zahid quickly, but we also want to be digging for Tempest Djinn. I've got Cryptic Command, so replace Cryptic Command within your budget. I was lucky enough to crack this from a Lorwyn booster pack. I didn't pay the premium price for this, but Cryptic Command really suits the deck. Reverse Engineer for more card draw, but can be reduced through the Improvise mechanic. Vanishment, so another unsummon kind of effect, but it has that miracle cost, which can be useful. And Sublime Epiphany. I really like this card because you can choose all of those. So it enables you to counter anything from countering the spell, an activated or triggered ability, to bouncing a permanent, creating a token of a target creature you control, and drawing a card. So this card does everything I want to do in a Genie deck. And finally, we get to the permanents in the artifacts and enchantments. So we start with Prying Blade. So I have a lot of Prying Blades. This is, one of my favorite cards in Commander when you have a really aggro-based general. I really like this whole idea of, having something that creates a treasure every time you deal combat damage. Sky Blinder's Staff. So this is to make sure that the Djinns can't be blocked in the air. Inquisitor's Flail. Great card if you have a commander with a little bit of evasion. So if equipped creature would deal combat damage, it deals double that damage instead. So, the downside is the creature receives double damage too, but hopefully if it has that flying ability, that's not going to happen too often. But imagine that on a Tempest Djinn that's been really juiced up with your islands. Ring of Evos Isle for the hexproof, and also to pump up the creature at the beginning of each upkeep. Mask of Memory for card draw. Mask of Avacyn for the hexproof, and Strider Harness for haste. So the thing about equipment is that you can actually tap the equipment as part of paying Zahid's alternative cost and equipping the equipment to Zahid, which is which is pretty interesting. You know, that's the kind of mechanic that having such a unique commander creates. All right, so we get to the non-equipment artifacts. We start with the Terence Trent Darby, which is just 1 mana scry 2 on drop, but it also can have some late game ability in being able to sack it to draw 2 cards. So it's a pretty handy artifact all up. Traveler's Amulet to just grab an island. Universal Solvent. So early game, 1 drop, can help summon forth Zahid. Late game can help you take out a troublesome permanent. Scroll of the Masters. I always wondered what deck I could put this card into. And I think I finally found it with Zahid. So whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets a lore counter, and target creature, so after paying that for that activated ability, target creature gets +1/+1 for each lore counter on Scroll of the Master. So given there's a large number of non-creature spells in this deck, this card can get pretty nasty pretty quickly, and either Zahid or Tempest Djinn can get juiced up. And with an Inquisitor's Flail, can obviously end the game pretty quickly. So I don't have Aladdin's Lamp, but I have a Courier's Capsule. So this is the next best thing, and probably even better. So that's a lamp that I can rub for Zahid. And again, if you choose not to leave it on the battlefield, you can sack it to draw 2 cards. So it's not just sitting there doing nothing. Sky Diamond for a little bit of extra mana acceleration. Armillary Sphere for those islands. Ichor Wellspring and Mycosynth Wellspring. So these artifacts do kind of just sit there, but they can help with that affinity, with the affinity needs for some of those spells, and you can even bounce them with a couple of the other instants and sorceries I had. But again, just good to have these as backups in case you're losing artifacts and you need something to summon Zahid. Shrine of Piercing Vision. Again, I just really like this card because I think it really fits in with Zahid. At the beginning of your upkeep, whenever you cast a blue spell, it gets a charge counter, and you can sack it to look at the top X cards of your library and put 1 in your hand, either just as a magic lamp on the battlefield, or it can actually do stuff when you desperately need something to happen. Seer's Lantern for mana. Victory Chimes, which is also for mana, but it untaps during each other player's untap step, so pretty handy mana rock there. Midnight Clock. I've got it in here mostly as another mana rock, but it does some interesting card drawing shenanigans too when the clock strikes 12 or whatever. Staff of the Mind Magus, so just a lamp to sit there, but gets you some valuable life gain. Implement of Examination, just an interesting little tool. So again, you can either have the option of just putting it onto the battlefield, or, if you desperately need something to happen, pay the cost, and it'll enable you to draw some cards. So in terms of the Genie theme, nothing better than Vidalcan Shackles. So, we've heard the story about how genies don't like being enslaved, but Vidalcan Shackles buys into the whole idea of putting something under your control, and it's based on the islands too. So while you're pumping up Tempest Djinn, Vidalcan Shackles gets pumped up from those activities as well. I've got Tezzeret's Gatebreaker in here, so this is just a handy little enter the battlefield and do some top deck manipulation. But again, it can also be sacked to make creatures you control unblockable, which could be useful late game. That's the last of the artifacts. So I have 2 enchantments here. I will just start with Kumina's Awakening. So this is dependent upon the City's Blessing. But at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the City's Blessing, you just draw an extra card, which is always handy in Commander. And the final enchantment is Dance of Many. So this is old school. What this card does is it enables you to copy. It says target summon card. So basically, once this enchantment enters the battlefield, it enables you to copy a creature and make a token of that creature. So ideally, Tempest Djinn. And, at the beginning of your upkeep, you either pay 2 or sacrifice it. But that's quite a small cost to pay for a really big creature. So that's the end of the Zahid Djinn of the Lamp deck tech. I'm really trying to emphasize the aggro components here while supporting the flavor of Genie summoning and Genie pumping and top deck manipulation and making wishes to find the card that I need at the right point in time. So the only way I can see how that works in a game scenario is to organize a game with a couple of friends. So hopefully that game will be up on the channel soon for you to enjoy, and we can see how this deck performs. Thank you for supporting and liking our content. We really appreciate that. Take care of yourselves, keep enjoying Magic, and until the next edition.